Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. If you'd like, introduce yourself in the chat, please. If you don't mind, stay muted during the presentation, and then when we get to the question and answer, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat if you'd like. While people are still joining, I wanted to do a brief introduction of NAMI GLAC, because I know some people shared this town hall meeting with others, so you may not be familiar with NAMI. And so I'm just going to give a real brief overview. NAMI is the nation's largest nonprofit dedicated to supporting people who live with mental illness, as well as the family and community. We have free support groups and classes throughout LA County. Many are online, where we've also started going in person. We have classes and support groups almost every day of the week. Within NAMI Greater LA County, we have several affiliates. There's NAMI Glendale, NAMI South Bay, San Fernando Valley, San Gabriel Valley, Pomona Valley, and we also have Long Beach and Whittier that are part of NAMI Greater LA County. And we also have a warm line that we have for each of our affiliates. We're a new provider of the Cal Hope program, so we're going to be starting to support that. And we also have a peer specialist training program that we recently started. So if you know anyone interested in that, feel free to send us an email at info@namiglac.org. And if you have any questions as well about NAMI, feel free again to email us at info@namiglac.org, or if you go onto our website, namiglac.org, you can find a calendar of all of our support groups and classes and events, and information on our warm line and our affiliates within LA County. And I know we also invited our friends at NULA, NAMI Urban LA, and NAMI West LA, which are two other affiliates within LA County as well. So feel free again to introduce yourself in the chat if you like. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Jennifer Hunt to introduce herself, and also to introduce Jean. So I will turn it over to you, Dr. Hunt.
Thank you, Traute, and thank you everybody for this opportunity and invitation to have a conversation and share some information. And I would like to, as I am one of the leads for Care Courts implementation for the Department of Mental Health, I'd like to introduce my colleague and fast becoming friend and collaborator, my counterpart in the CEO's office, and I will pass it to her.
Hi, everybody. Jean Ho from the LA County Chief Executive Office. And yes, we are also partnering closely with DMH and other key county partners in this effort. So glad to join you all. Back to you, Jennifer.
Okay, so thanks, Jean. So Jean has done an amazing amount of the graphics and visual representations that you will see this evening in our presentation. So just want to give a quick introduction. And again, thank you to NAMI for allowing us to have this space and conversation. NAMI and DMH have been partners for many years. And so the opportunity to come and be able to connect with community members in this forum, we're very happy to be here. And in my role under Director Wong at DMH, I'm over the Reentry programs. And so that is the countywide engagement division with Deputy Director Latina Jackson. That is Office of the Public Guardian with Deputy Director Luis Leiva. And that is the Forensic Psychiatry division, which is under the tutelage of a few of our different managers. for the probation youth in the halls and camps, as well as our court liaison and linkage program. And ultimately, that's where Care Court will be residing when it goes live in December of this year. So as Traute had shared, we really want to have time to have a conversation afterwards. So if you have questions and are comfortable, you can place those in the chat, or you have the ability to raise your hand later. But I would like for us to be able to at least have a little bit of content shared, and then give everyone an opportunity to have a conversation as we kind of segue into that part of the talk. So if we could go to our first slide. And thank you, Chris, for the IT support to make this happen as well. So this is our program overview related to the implementation here in Los Angeles County. Next slide. So we're going to cover 8 brief things today, which is talking about some basic definitions, talking about the petition itself, what a care agreement plan is, and then looking at how does this differ from another court-related program, which individuals may be familiar with. And then lastly, talking about how care fits in the larger scope of all the different programs that we offer at DMH. And first, because it would be good to know what everybody in the audience is thinking about related to this topic. So we have a brief poll. And if you can please, this is, I believe, anonymous, just select one of these things and hit submit. This is my first time using the poll feature, so.
Chris, is the poll, do people just need to put in, how do they select which number or
I
which
think it
letter?
comes up on screen, right?
Yes, correct. They'll see a pop-up, and then they'll choose the option, the answer they prefer.
Got it.
And it looks like we have about 62 out of the 71 attending who have already answered.
Okay. Awesome.
And so how do we get the results?
One moment, let me present those now.
All right. So the prompt was, are you planning? Okay. So some in each group. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for giving us an idea of where our audience is kind of at. If we can move to our next piece. Okay, so what is Care Court? So the CARE Act, which was Senate Bill 1338. Oh wait, go back. There we go. It passed in the fall of last year. It's, hold on though, it's going and doing weird things. There we go. So with that, this process is a civil court process that is going to be focusing on the individuals in the community that have untreated schizophrenia spectrum or psychotic disorders. It's focusing on behavioral health and housing resources and services. This is something that, as a voluntary process, it is designed to protect self-determination and civil liberties by having a legal counsel and also the option of a voluntary supporter to be able to promote supported decision making. This is a process that intervenes sooner in the lives of individuals who may need support. And lastly, this looks at making sure that local governments such as the county have the support while being accountable and driving accountability for the different services we provide. Next slide. Okay, here is the high level. This is how things will work in LA County. And for our purposes today, we want to be able to just highlight the flow and the sequence of potential events. The initial case would start with one of two petitioning groups. Then there is what we would refer to as that assessment phase, where once the petition goes to the court, and as long as it has the content and is filled out with the necessary components, which we'll address later, it will start moving through the hearing process. And these things are highlighted in the sequence of boxes. What we did highlight is that this is if you want to say, the ideal scenario as a case would move through care court. Now, as you will notice with the yeses, we didn't highlight the no's, because for our purposes today, we really want to talk about what care court does and what its intent is and how we are going to be doing this and enacting this process in LA County. So while we will talk about some of the different things of other scenarios or other pieces, we really want to be able to just touch upon how are the determinations made, what does a treatment order look like, i.e. what's the care plan or the care agreement, and then what does treatment and the court oversight look like as this time period elapses on. And for those that I don't have my bifocals on, but if you look at the bottom, there is a timeline. And so the statute also has specifics relating to when these different events would occur and how quickly the subsequent meetings or reports or updates would need to be provided to the court. So you will see that from the time that a petition would be filed to the time that, for example, the review, some of the assessment phases, determination phases, as we walk through the timeline, you would be having services that would initiate within a few months from the time that the petition was filed with the court and upheld. And I don't know, there's
Sorry, let me just stop. There's a weird yellow thing. So let me
Yeah.
just share for a second and then put that back on.
That's why I was wondering about that. I was like, uh-oh.
Let me try this one more time. Sorry about the technical difficulties here. And then let's put this in a bigger view for you all. Okay, there we go.
There we go. Ah, much better. Thank you. So with that, you'll see, as like with the bottom timeline, it'll say that within so many days, the court days, that this next step would occur. And as you walk through the different sequential pieces, there are tight timelines associated to that. And the intent of care court was to make sure that people that had not been receiving treatment previously would be able to receive treatment in a very timely fashion. And we will, because we want to make sure that we have time and space for everybody to have a conversation, we're going to touch upon these different elements, but we are not going to tonight go into the specifics of the different pieces of these different the blue boxes. We're going to try to stay more with the linear process. And it did say at the top that the location for this, according to the Superior Court, is going to be in Norwalk, at the Norwalk Courthouse. We can do the next slide. Okay. So according to the statute, that care court is focused on helping the adult population, individuals that are 18 and older, that the care court is very specific. It's really focusing on individuals that have a disorder and or diagnosis of schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders. This is not a program that is focused on individuals that have developmental delays, are on the autism spectrum, that have other types of difficulties, it is really focused on schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders. One of the other components of the statute says that you are currently experiencing behaviors and symptoms that are associated with that severe mental illness, and that currently you are not clinically stabilized in any ongoing voluntary treatment. So those are the base pieces. The next piece is that at least one of the next two bullet points are occurring. One is that the person is unlikely to survive safely without supervision and their condition is substantially deteriorating, or they need services and supports to prevent relapse or deterioration, which, if not receiving an intervention, could lead to grave disability or the danger to self or others. The goal of care is that the individual will participate in the care plan or agreement, and that this is the least restrictive alternative and setting for them to receive that treatment. And lastly is that they would be likely to benefit from participating in a care plan or agreement. So this is how the statute was set up to frame the services that would be provided through the care process. The next slide. Okay, so who can petition? And this kind of goes back to our initial polling question. So there are 12 groups of individuals defined by statute that can petition. We group those individuals into individuals that the respondent may encounter in the home or in the family, such as someone they reside with, the spouse, parent, sibling, child, grandparent, or other individual in the place of the parent, or actually the respondent themselves. So they could technically self-petition. The community members would be first responders, which the examples are peace officer, firefighter, paramedic, mobile crisis response, homeless outreach workers, or the directors of the hospitals, such as where someone may be hospitalized for a 5150 or a 5250. Also, licensed behavioral health professionals who are treating the respondent can also petition. And the director of a public charitable organization that provides behavioral health services or an institution where the respondent resides. That's the community group. And then we have the county group. So the county behavioral health, i.e. DMH, public guardian or their designee, and or the director of adult protective services. One of the other groups that would be able to petition are those that are under tribal jurisdictions, the director of California Indian Health Services programs, and the judge of a tribal court. So uniquely, LA County does not have any tribal jurisdiction courts in our LA County boundaries. However, there are other cohort member, first cohort members, counties that do. And next, please. Okay, so how to file the petition. So the petition is actually a judicial council document, like any other legal filing document. It's available online, and right now it's still in draft form because as a early implementer to Care Court, the counties in cohort 1 are going to be going live in October of this year. Originally, and by statute, LA County is in the second cohort. However, with a series of events that occurred leading up to the board motion and LA entering and declaring that they were going to be an early participant of Care Court in January of this year, it made sense that LA County, since they had declared a state of emergency relating to homelessness in the county, and that was on the heels of the city's declaration of homelessness with Mayor Bass entering as the new mayor of Los Angeles City, it made sense that you would have another major piece of legislation and a program that would be implemented at the same time, because in many ways there's a crossover and a focus on individuals that are unhoused. And so this is part of that collective move by the county to be able to try to provide services to as many individuals in our county as possible. In the county of Los Angeles, we have 10 million residents. And so we actually have 25% of the entire state's population here in LA County. Because that's such a huge number, and one of the things that the courts have been looking at and in part of this implementation process is how do you work with the petitions that could potentially come from all over the county. So they are looking at the potential of an e-file system. The petitions can be turned in anywhere in person at the Norwalk Courthouse and the Hollywood Courthouse, but they can also be physically turned in anywhere that the self-help centers are located. And the e-file option, they're hoping to have live soon. So as we get ready for Care Court in December, we wanted to make sure that everybody knew how to fill out the petition. So not only are there questions on the legal document, but there are also 2 pieces of documentation that one of the 2 needs to be attached to the petition. So one piece that could be attached is a declaration from a mental health care provider, a licensed behavioral health care provider. Or the second piece would be evidence that the respondent, the person that you would want to be receiving the care services, was detained for what they call 2 periods of intense treatment. And intense treatment is defined as the WIC 5250 holds. Also, in that second piece of evidence, that the most recent one would be within the previous 60 days. So with this in mind, these are the elements of a petition. We can go to next page. Okay, so you file the petition, or someone that knows the respondent files the petition in one of those 12 groups, and the judge upholds it, and they start to move through that process and timeline that we referenced earlier. Well, what's in an agreement? What's in the plan? What's this actually going to do to help the respondent? And the key is that there are 4 components to a care agreement. And given my days of when I used to teach in different capacities, I went for a mnemonic and a reminder of, okay, there's 2 things that the statute talks about. One is a care agreement and one is a plan. The agreement is, if you look at literally agree in the name, this is part that this is earlier on in the course of the care process where the individual is open to and agreeing to the care plan, or I'm sorry, to the agreement. And so it would have these components. It would have behavioral health services. It would have a discussion regarding medications. It would have a discussion related to housing resources, and it would have components of social services and supports. The idea is that this is a collaborative process to come to this agreement with the respondent, with their identified legal aid and attorney, which currently is under the statute, the legal representation would come from a legal aid group. And if no legal aid group is available, then it would default to the public defender's office. So right now, the state is still in the process of figuring out the logistics related to the bids and the way that they are going to be having the agencies be able to continue the application process. I'm trying not to use acronyms. The county is very good with acronyms. The request for applications, or the request, the submissions process for those groups to be selected by the courts. So with the care agreement and the respondent, the legal counsel, with what they also brought in as referring to the volunteer supporter. So CARE Act has and wants to include a supporter, a person with lived experience or somebody that the individual has a good relationship with and trusts, to be able to help them with supportive decision making. And while we think that many people have family members that may fill that role, we just want to caution that in this process, because it is all driven by the respondent, that if the respondent doesn't want that supporter to be a part of the process, or if they don't entirely agree with what the supporter is saying or doing, that the respondent has the right to terminate that supporter's role and participation in the process. So we caution and bring this up because we know that a lot of times if family members want to be involved, there are certain roles and limits, and the respondent does have, as we talk about with decision making, a lot of say about what does happen through this process. So in addition to this piece, then I'll also talk about what DMH wants to do as part of our global care team, which is a little different from the way that we have run previous programs and structured services, which I'll come back to in a sec. If we could go to the next slide. Okay, so out of the 4 pieces, the other big piece that comes up and is a big emphasis, especially because of a lot of individuals that do not have stable housing, that are experiencing homelessness, is that there is a big focus on the behavioral health bridge housing and how this could help individuals that are going through care. So LA County was allocated with $321 million that we could apply for to support our efforts with the care implementation. And of that 321 million, almost 20% of it is going to our colleagues at the Department of Public Health. Sorry, it's about to cough, sorry. Sorry, a little dry. Okay, sorry about it. So at the Department of Health, for services related to substance abuse treatment beds. So of the remaining money that would be going to LA County, we were looking to have it, excuse me, in these categories. So here we go, on the fly. Now I'm going to try to read with my glasses on. All right. So with that, there were 2 groups and 2 kind of buckets that LA County proposed to have that housing money go into. Part of it was for shelters and interim housing. Part of it is for rental assistance, which could be to help support the individual as they are living in their community with loved ones. It could also go towards housing navigation, which may also help support with some assistance funds related to one-time costs of a move-in. It could also go toward the landlord outreach and mitigation. So if there are damages to a property, that money could help maintain and fix the places so that the landlord would continue and be able to rent the location to others. And then the other group of money is related to the program implementation. It would also be used for outreach and engagement. And it would also allow us to start and build the infrastructure for some of the other housing options. We submitted this proposal in April, and we hope sometime this month in June that we would receive a response from the state if our proposal was accepted. The key is that we did ask for the entire amount of money that was offered by the state. So the state offered 321 million. So we made a proposal for 320 million point 99999, right? So we didn't leave any money on the table, and we really want to be able to use this money to help expand the portfolio of housing options and opportunities for members of the community. Next slide. Okay. So how is Care Court different from AOT? So AOT stands for Assisted Outpatient Treatment, and it's also known as Laura's Law. And AOT has a much more narrow group of individuals that can petition, and there are a few different places that AOT differs from CARE. Instead of sitting into a more academic analysis, we wanted to just emphasize the things that CARE has in a different way than AOT. So CARE has a narrow list of the diagnoses which qualify for the program. So the goal and the aim of CARE initially was to really focus on services and supports for the individuals that meet criteria for schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders. Because of that, while it has a narrower list of focus for clinical, it has a much larger list of individuals who could actually generate the petition. It also has this role of the supporter, which I had mentioned earlier, to assist with the treatment team and the supportive decision-making. Care Court is also a process from beginning to end that covers approximately a year. And if the person is doing well, or the team feels that they would benefit from an extension for 1 year to the program, they can do that and look at that decision at that 11th month out of the 12-month process. Care Court, though, is only meant to be a 1 year with an option 2-year program. And the idea is to be able to stabilize individuals and get them into consistent care treatment and help them with their needs, whether it be housing, whether it be the behavioral health, whether it be the other social supports and resources that they need connection with. One of the big hallmark differences is that care will be available in every county statewide by 2025. So unlike AOT, which is only in select counties around the state, care will be in every county. The other big thing with care is that if the individual, the respondent, is on a managed care plan or has an insurance plan other than Medi-Cal, that is not a barrier to referral, and that is not a barrier to treatment. And so we want to make sure that that critical piece is understood, because a lot of times from our conversations, families have made really tough decisions to try to optimize what their loved one would be available and eligible for, and sometimes have had them go onto a Medi-Cal plan because they knew that that was a way to access a lot more services. So that is what makes care unique, is that it is not a program that is only available to individuals that have Medi-Cal. And if we can go on to the next page. Okay, so let's see how well the animation stays with everybody. He's definitely walking a little slower than he was in our earlier run-throughs, but we wanted to kind of put into context where care sits among the other services and array of settings and resources that LA County provides. And so for those that may be familiar with our strategic plan at the Department of Mental Health, we talk about services in 3 realms. We talk about them in the reentry, which is the red. We talk about crisis stabilization, which is in the yellow. And we talk about outpatient services in the green. We talk about reentry being really a restrictive place. It's where individuals are coming out of, whether it be incarceration, out of the juvenile halls and camps, out of the streets, where it's talked about by our former director, Dr. Sharon, as the open air asylums. And it's where people are really isolated and disconnected. And that's the reentry realm. What we see in the crisis stabilization are the hospitals, the crisis response teams. We see our mobile teams as supporting individuals that are in crisis, and crisis is a temporary state. Ideally, we have everybody leaving the red. They may have a brief stop in yellow. Some people maybe just had a brief stop in yellow and weren't in the red. But ultimately, the goal of DMH is to have everybody in the green, in the outpatient services realm, in the community, receiving services by the community, their community. And that is a real big focus for us here. So if you notice, going from the most restrictive in the red to the least restrictive in the green, we want to make sure that we look at and see where care fits in this this graphic. And so if you look, the IMDs, or the locked settings, those are only placement options once somebody has had that 5150 hospital stay and establishing those criteria. We refer to the home team, which people on this call may be familiar with. That's our homeless outreach and mobile engagement team, run out of the reentry services at DMH. We refer to the home team as a team that is seeing individuals that are what we call gravely disabled adjacent. And so they are chronically unhoused, they have real difficult, complex medical concerns, as well as other social support concerns. And we provide all the services from the home team and by the home team in the field where the clients are. On the bottom two, the enhanced residential services and the CRTP services, that's where we have mental health services that are within those types of placements. So ERS is a little bit more long-term housing and mental health service combination than the crisis residential treatment program, which is looking at helping stabilize somebody for approximately a month. Oftentimes, when individuals come out of the hospitals, an ERS or a CRTP placement helps in that return to the community. If you see AOT, which is the next group to the right, that's our assisted outpatient treatment program. And we see that as more restrictive than care, because AOT has a much more restrictive series of requirements by statute. We see care next, and then we see FSP, which is full service partnership. I imagine for many people, they're like, my goodness, LA County, you like your acronyms. So everything has an acronym virtually for the county. And the full service partnership is one of the flagship programs that comes out of Prop 63, which is the mental health, and which has funded the Mental Health Services Act. So we refer to that affectionately as MHSA, and it wouldn't fit in the bubble, so I had to just keep it with just MHSA. Outpatient treatment in the field, we used to have, and we called them by different names, but this is our array of services that are provided to individuals that don't need to come to the clinic. These are the services that are provided in the community. And lastly, outpatient treatment, where you will see our little figure sitting comfortably in his chair. is our visual representation of outpatient treatment at our clinics and our offices. So we have a whole array of services that range from services that are in a locked setting all the way to services that the client walks into in the community. And so we wanted to talk about care being that critical piece, hence the individual with the green mental health puzzle piece as they are carrying it, that we wanted to talk about how care would work in context to many of the other services that we are providing at DMH. And if we can go to the final page, and I'm trying to keep an eye on time, and I know there's a lot of questions that have been going in the chat, is that because I'm here to talk about Care Court, we also want to make sure that you don't need to wait. If you know someone that needs help now, that we have other resources and other programs, just like described on that previous slide, that are available now. We have them through the 988 crisis lines. We have them available through our 24/7 helpline, which is a multilingual response team and amount of resources of all different things at the phone number. And so we want to be able to provide these things in context of the other services that we're providing at DMH. So I'm looking at the time and know that we also would like for everybody to participate in a survey, but perhaps Jean, if it's okay with you, because I've seen a few of the questions fly up, can we go back to the large overview picture of the flow? There we go.
And I jotted down all the questions sort of as they came from the chat, so we can go through them. I can actually pose them to you so you can answer them for everybody if you want to do that.
So we'll go back to when we conclude the space. We'll do the chat questions first, and then we can open it up to those on the call.
Yep.
Does that sound good?
And I know a bunch of you had asked if we could share this, so we're happy to share a version of this. I will send Traute a PDF of this, and then she'll distribute accordingly. And I don't know if we actually mentioned this, but did we mention the launch date in LA? We all take it for granted because we've been planning for so long, it's just embedded, but in LA, it is launching December 1st. A few counties will go earlier in October, but LA is sort of a special case. We have volunteered and raised our hand to go earlier than our December 2024 legally mandated date. So
right. So the state refers to us as cohort 1.2, affectionately or facetiously, depending. But
all right, so
okay,
on this page, so do you want me to just rattle off some of the questions that we saw in the chat and then you can answer them?
Sure, that'd be great.
Question one, so sort of in the order, loosely in the order, but there's a question about Norwalk Courthouse and whether there's any idea if initial courts can come online. As I know some folks are worried, LA County being very big geographically, it is a challenge to get from one end of the county to another. So some folks have been asking about that.
Okay, so let me take a step back. So the courts, we've all been working not only in our parallel implementation, but also been sharing and crossing over greatly among one another to make sure that we really have a coordinated effort for implementation. So while the courthouse and the courtroom will physically reside at Norwalk, they are exploring, and it is written into the statute, that participation can be remote. So it is possible right now that an individual can participate remotely and does not actually physically have to go to the Norwalk courthouse to participate. So that's the first part. Sorry, my light went off in the office. There we go. Sorry about that. So that, yes, while it's in Norwalk, there are other places for the self-help. The e-filing will be coming online, and there is the possibility of remote participation.
Right. The next question was about voluntary support, or just this is part of the process. Can a voluntary supporter be appointed by the courts if the individual rejects family assistance?
Yes. So that is where there will be many people ideally that are trained and available to be supporters that are not related potentially to the respondent and available. One of the other pieces that we wanted to make sure with LA County, and this was part of our Mental Health Services Act stakeholder process earlier this year, was that when we saw in LA County that, and I don't think I have the ability to point, so I'm just gonna have to call it out on the screen. When we saw that the supporter is offered during the determination and treatment phase of this process, we at LA County said, we know that having peers, persons with lived experience as members of DMH have been very, very powerful. And peers bring their lived experience and their degrees, if you want to speak, in their life experience to the job and to relate with the respondent in ways that individuals like me that are classically clinically trained, maybe it just doesn't land the same way. Maybe it just doesn't just connect with the individual in that way. And so we wanted our peers, our persons with lived experience, our employees at DMH to be part of this process at the case initiation. We wanted them to be available at the courthouse to answer questions at self-help. We wanted to be able to help the community in conversations like these, where we can come and talk and try to connect with individuals and families that need help. And we want to do that all the way through the process. And so part of our implementation team with DMH and with CEO has been to have our DMH peers not only at the table during that conversation, but also to be a dominant amount of the employees we look to hire to be able to not only do the outreach and the engagement, but actually provide the services moving forward. And so we're actually going to uniquely have the outreach and engagement teams and the treatment teams all be served by DMH employees.
Right. So the next question related to process as well. So somebody rightly pointed out one of the ways AOT is different from care court is sort of the sequencing of events. In AOT, you'll, unlike AOT for care court, you're proceeding right into the court hearings. But what then the question came up was what's our plan for ensuring respondents attend those court hearings, both in terms of transportation and support, especially since we know that this population may not wish to attend.
Mm-hmm. So that's where we can bring the courthouse to you. We have our clinical teams would be able to meet the individual, the respondent in the community, and have them participate from wherever they are. We also have asked for the transportation vehicles so that we can actually go and transport the client and provide support and resources, such as one of our peer employees, to be able to be with the respondent through this process. We also are figuring out how to be able to reimburse for rideshare and the public transport so that if the individual wants to go to the courthouse on their own, but transportation would otherwise be a barrier, we're working on that as well. And we can use the monies to provide that type of transport. So we're really focusing on having the respondent be the one that we're focusing the care and treatment on, but also they're the ones that drive this process forward. Because this is a voluntary process, if the respondent does not want to participate, there are ways, and with their legal counsel, that they can express that. And there are different ways that the judge could close out the petition and have the individual exit the care court process.
One thing also we recognize too as part of this process is this is why it's very important to partner with you all, especially if you're planning to, petition for a loved one, family member. We recognize then you're maybe one of our best assets to also reaching the respondent in between those hearings, because that's sort of the risky point where we might not be able to find them and bring them back to proceed with the court hearings. And that relates to a question that just got dropped in the chat because it's related to this. But what happens if the deadlines in the court process are not met, whether by the county or the respondent?
Sure. So it's the responsibility of the county to stay to the timelines. And we can honestly get in trouble if we don't, by the court and by statute. So the fact is that this process for many individuals may not look linear. They may not want to participate at the beginning. And so if we can demonstrate to the judge that we're still attempting to collaborate and work together, there are ways that the judges can extend and give us a continuance to be able to continue to try to outreach and engage. And that's what our experience has been with AOT as well, is that when the judge, when everybody on the team shares with the judge, look, Your Honor, this is what's been going on, that we're really looking to try to engage individuals into care and treatment. That's where we sit with it. But we do know that if individuals do not want to participate, then again, they do have the rights to make those decisions for themselves.
And then really quickly, I had answered this question early in the chat, but I just thought I'd share it with you all. So somebody had asked about the two different petitioner paths that we had in this diagram. So we just wanted to point out here, and this is kind of also in relation to AOT, but there's actually, as Jennifer had shown you early on another page, there are 12 allowable petitioner categories. DMH is one of them, but then this other petitioner bucket is the other 11. And this is kind of one of the ways it, again, differentiates from AOT. In AOT, only DMH could petition. Here, Care Court has broadened that opportunity so that there's 11 other petitioner categories that can feed into this process.
Right. So we are working with our county partners and partner departments to figure out how, so that there are not duplications, we're coordinating and working through multi-assessment teams to figure out and make sure that all of our county partners are on the same page related to referrals. But there are many groups, as Jean shared, that can petition directly to the courts. But either way, depending upon whatever entry point, at the point, and I have to look closely because I don't, my glasses, it is actually at the initial hearing point where no matter who filed the petition, they are substituted out for the Department of Mental Health per statute. And it is the Department of Mental Health's responsibility as the petitioner from the initial hearing point forwards. So we just want to emphasize that piece as well. So if the petitioner, for example, is a loved one or a family member, then as the respondent goes through the process, that family member could be the supporter because they're no longer the one moving the petition through or providing the clinical evaluations or materials at that point.
So our next bunch of questions relate to the criteria. So I'm just going to flip to that page so we can sit on that while you answer the questions.
Yes.
So there's a couple, I'll start off just quite a different questions about the definition of gravely disabled. I know Mark Gale had answered it a little bit. Maybe you can also speak to that, Dr. Hunt, as well.
Sure. So gravely disabled is actually defined as, and I would have to pull the statute I'm going to summarize, that difficulties with accessing the food, clothing, shelter, and some of the being able to provide for themselves. Just very quickly, it is actually described in statute, and so we can also provide that so that we're not misquoting. But that component, if you look at for example, at least one of the following, it's the unlikely to survive safely without supervision and that their condition is substantially deteriorating, or that they need the services and supports to prevent relapse or deterioration, which would lead to the status of grave disability or harm to self or harm to others. So I know I saw briefly, and I'll probably, this is why I don't have the chat up and Jean's helping facilitate. I know there were also some questions about, I saw it briefly about substance use and about substance disorders, correct?
Yes, there was one about, somebody wanted to ask about the impact of meth use, for instance.
Sure. So one of the things that CARE wanted to focus on is that the dominant concern is the mental health concern. If the individual has substance use and specifically co-occurring, that's not an exclusionary thing. And that's why with Bridge Housing, public health and our partners with substance abuse treatment, SAPC has those beds and that treatment option. And that's why it's a part of our CARE portfolio, is that we know individuals that have severe mental illness are often struggling with substances as well. But this is not to be a substance abuse priority dominant diagnosis or concern. It's that what's driving the concerns and needs of the individual is the mental health condition, the underlying mental health condition.
And so I think maybe what the individual also might have been wondering about too is whether that meth use would disqualify somebody from receiving the care, and that won't.
No,
but it doesn't also get you into the program automatically either.
Substance abuse or substance use on its own, if it was the only thing, that is a concern for the CARE court criteria. But if the person is utilizing meth because that's how they're self-medicating for their mental health condition, that is not going to exclude them or make them ineligible for care.
And I don't know if Kathy had a follow-up question related to that point.
So actually, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hi Kathy.
Hi, that was not my question. I guess my question is a little larger, and I'll try to keep it brief. Having worked at the VA in very similar programs and done so much of this wonderful stuff, I mean, this whole path is amazing, especially for people in the community who don't have the VA. It's great. And the only thing I can share is that you can do all of this. You can get to that nice green section and in comes meth and it all falls apart. So for those who are eligible and are using these substances, I'm just hoping that finally LA County will supply some extra support, whether it's harm reduction in the part of the program or whatever, but it's been so destructive to the most healthy people. We've gotten them so healthy, and they're taking their medications. And you know all about this, but I just wanted to say that's my concern. I've been the meth pain in the neck to everybody for like a couple years. So thank you for letting me share that.
But that's, I think that's a great advocacy point, is that, we have individuals that then, like you said, are getting involved in substances that are fundamentally disrupting their lives. And so while that is a component of it, we want to be sure that we are providing resources for that and working with our Department of Public Health in order to increase the access and resources, beds, and different types of services, but also to make sure that we're also doing what we need to do with DMH to be able to provide mental health services as well. So, but we do know that that is something that does happen and is estimated and expected to be something that a lot of individuals would be experiencing.
Right.
And then Sheila and Natalie, if you wouldn't mind holding just for a second, I'm going to try to get through the other written questions just for the criteria, and then we'll get back to you guys in a second. But going back to the gravely disabled and sort of the deterioration of the condition of the respondent, I think a couple other folks had questions related. One, how do you even determine who's unlikely to survive?
I think this is a clinical assessment and constellation of many facts that go into that. This is the statute's language, not ours. And so we look at many different things that are impacting the individual's ability to make decisions to keep themselves safe. And so I think we could definitely spend more time kind of teasing those things out, but it comes from the legalese relating to criteria for not only hospitalization, but also for various other items related to either services or the criteria for hospitalization.
And in a similar vein, so a lot of folks also might have co-occurring physical issues too that are actually also threatening or,
Right.
impacting their survival on the street. So
Right.
how does that factor into qualifying for the program? Or
That if they
versus
have other if they have other
Yeah.
medical concerns or other concerns that are directly impacting their safety.
Yes. Does that affect, though, does that play into the definition that qualifies them for care court or not? If you, for instance, are diabetic and you are not doing well physically.
Right. Well, if somebody's participating in care, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't also meet criteria at any moment for the 5150 hospitalization. So just because they're participating in care doesn't mean that they can't be in crisis or have a crisis of many different components. So one does not mean that you can have and utilize the other service. Care is not seen as a crisis response mechanism, but we do still have teams and the ability to get individuals to a hospital if they are in imminent danger to self, others, or have reached that gravely disabled status for many different reasons.
But I think the short answer too is if you are facing a serious physical medical issue, it's not going to qualify you for care because there's a strict definition. There is the schizophrenia diagnosis requirement,
Right.
but you will be treated for this as part of your entire treatment, your care plan.
Right.
I mean, that will be addressed. But there are other programs, and part of the design of the program, we recognize a lot of folks might come through in the beginning. And if you don't qualify, that doesn't mean the county doesn't stop helping you. We are working also diligently on referral pathways back out to the rest of the continuum of care within the county overall.
Yeah. And for those that may to go back to, and she went off screen, I believe it was Kathy, to go back to her comment about the meth, that if it is meth primary and there isn't a known underlying mental health condition, then that's where our partners from SAPC and public health would come in, because that would mean that we would want public health to be the primary and be able to provide those substance abuse services right then and there. So that's what we're working on too, is how do we make sure that people are really in the programs that they need in that moment and then in that way.
Along the same lines, somebody had asked a question. I'm sure this is a question that others might have. If again, they don't meet the schizophrenia spectrum diagnosis, but they are exhibiting strong signs of a psychotic disorder, even if they don't qualify for care. Again, part of the reason why you're engaging with DMH though, and the specialists, are to be able to figure out where else we need to sort of refer you to and find something. So facilitate a warm handoff of some sort. So you won't qualify though because of the schizophrenia spectrum diagnosis, but this part of the solution is to find where you should land.
Okay, what was the original post?
The question was, what do we do with a loved one who will not get a diagnosis but has strong signs and symptoms of a psychotic disorder?
Okay, so there's a second piece to that, and that actually, so if they have the signs and symptoms, the other element is that in the affidavit or the attestation by the qualified mental health provider, there are caveats that the person may have never been diagnosed before, right? So there are many loved ones that are cared for in the community that individuals maybe in the county or other health plans haven't had a lot of contact with. And so there are ways that if it is believed that they would meet the criteria for schizophrenia or that other psychotic disorder, then that affidavit by the mental health provider would be part of that information to inform the teams in the court about the level of need of the client.
And then another question related to qualification. If the most recent 5250 is required to be within the last 60 days, are there stipulations regarding the time frame for the first 5250?
No, I believe the only qualifier is the 60 days for at least that one of them. So,
And
and we'll definitely we can also provide the statute so that everybody on the call can also look at those specific pieces. Do we want to take, I know there's people patiently with faces and hands up. Because I imagine the chat questions are going to keep coming. So,
yeah. Well, these are like the ones from
before?
a while ago. So I
my
apologize
goodness.
to those who have their hands up. These are also the chat ones that have been here since the beginning. So I'm trying to get through those.
Okay. Because I just want to make sure I know we want to be able to try to address them all. So
yeah, my apologies to those who are patiently waiting. We'll try to get through these really quickly. Several similar themes. Also, what about a person's justice involvement status? So one, is if somebody is incarcerated, could they benefit from care court?
There are ways we are looking at, because what's interesting is that the jails are not specifically outlined, but licensed behavioral health care providers are. So we're working out how we would do that, but it has been very specific that this is not part of our, if you want to say, where was my other little note about it? That this is not a formal element of a diversion program. This is not considered diversion. Care is its own individual standalone process. There are different, like we said, petitions and entry points, but it would have to fall under one of those 12 groups. And there are licensed behavioral health clinicians within the jail. So we'll be working with correctional health on that.
And along those same lines, on the flip side of this, justice involvement is actually not a requirement for care court, unlike some other programs that might be out there. So there was a question, does care court require a person being incarcerated? And the answer would be no, that is not involved. That has nothing to do with your qualification for this program.
Right. So the qualifications are the ones on screen. It's mental health, and if you want to think about it as the level of functioning and access to treatment that they have in this moment or in the time leading up to. The other key part is that they're not in stabilized, ongoing voluntary treatment. So we're really looking at trying to help individuals that are not receiving treatment right now.
Okay, and one last one from the criteria, the pre-chat criteria question, then we can go to the folks with their hands raised. There was a question here. Let's see, if a outreach doctor had started psych meds, but the person is still homeless, would that person qualify for services? I think that might be speaking to that criteria bullet point about not being clinically stabilized and ongoing.
Well, and outreach teams are eligible petitioners. So if the individual, the licensed health behavioral care individual or the outreach team, that first responder group, knows that they are not stable in ongoing voluntary treatment, then they can petition. Right. There's a lot of different groups that may have different views of an individual, and that's what they're bringing into the petition.
I'll let you take questions from the first person, the folks with their hands raised.
Is it left to right? Is that the sequence of people coming on screen?
I think it's from the top to the bottom if you look at the participants, right? Actually, yes, because I kind of was watching this. I believe Sheila was first in line.
I'm going to try to have some order. So left or right, Sheila.
Thank you, Dr. Hunt. Thank you for doing this for us tonight. I have two fast questions for you. One is because many people on the spectrum, the schizophrenic spectrum, this is a marathon. Can they do care court more than once? If they do it, they graduate, let's say a year from afterwards, they really need to be participating again. Is that available to them more than once? And my second question is services. We lack so many services, hospital beds, IMDs, as well as just people in the mental health field. Do we have enough services to take care of all of our loved ones? Thank you so much.
Of course. So, okay. So two things. First was, and I'm trying to look and see people on screen. So the first is that inquiring if they can go through the care court process more than once, right? And so it's interesting that the statute just talks about the care process and about the extension. So, I think looking long term, I would have to go back to legal counsel and see what they actually say. But if we think about any other service, then, if this is their level of need and they meet the criteria, it's not an exclusionary that, oh, well, you've done care court before and it was successful or not. So, but I will say this, that one of the things that is at the end is that if the individual does not graduate or is not participating in care, that within so many months, that can be something that can be considered if an LPS conservatorship investigation were to occur. So, like what you were describing, if they needed care a year from now, then you may be looking at a different series of facts and looking at, okay, well, is care court the most appropriate, or is there something else going on that would maybe have it be a conversation about another type of care? And no doubt, resources, including people, are in high demand. And so, we are looking to incentivize and provide many different types of incentives for people to join and be part of care court and be part of our process. We're looking at and have requested to hire, in our first group, we'd like to hire 100+ people in order to make this happen. And then depending upon how much demand and the volume, we have plans for what that would look like to expand. And so, yes, the county in general is really trying to increase recruitment efforts. And, we want to continue to expand capacity just like anything else. We don't want to continue to just chip away at the same finite resource. We want to be able to expand. And so, if you know anybody, if you are that buddy, the body, we are excited and looking forward to being able to increase our DMH team. So
thank you.
I'm going to take the opportunity for the shameless plug that come join us, right? So, and then am I saying it right? Is it Nazi or Nazi? Nazi? Meskin? I'm reading the screen. No?
I think it's actually Natalie who was next anyway, so we can go to Natalie, maybe Nazi.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I wasn't able to, unmute my screen.
That's okay.
This is
Am
Nazi.
I saying your name correctly? Nazi?
Yes, that's absolutely
okay,
correct.
girl.
And thank you so much for this, wonderful, informative session. My question is actually, is this a voluntary program, or
Yes.
for somebody like my son that is in absolute denial of having any underlying mental health, which he was diagnosed, with a schizophrenia, and as long as he was on medication, he was doing well. And then when he started refusing getting medication and he started self-medicating, which now I'm dealing with mental health, substance abuse. And as a result of that, he had a suicide attempt that caused severe medical condition. He has been in so many 5150 sessions, but the problem is, even in that situation, he can simply AMA.
Yeah.
And all the hospitals let him go. And
Yeah.
as a result of that, he's gravely disabled. He's on the street. And when when he reached out to me, I'll take him to psych because of his medical condition that requires like wound care, for example. they won't keep him in that unit. So he'll transfer to medical. And what I have unfortunately learned that is the staff at the medical units are not trained to deal with a mental health patient. So they don't know what to do with them. And they're very difficult patients, I understand.
Well,
And because of their medical, they won't keep him in mental. So how can we have that situation?
Well, and here's the thing is that, you know, you go back to the petition and the two components and not to, I don't want to use a public space to talk about your loved one's specifics, but I want to go just emphasize the fact that the individual would need to meet the criteria for the either through the affidavit or through the evidence of those 250s. And so if, for example, he doesn't, then that would be where we would look at some of the other programs, such as our home team or other types of resources that we have right now. So I will ask this though, based on what you've shared, Nazi, can you do me a favor? And if you feel comfortable sending your contact information through, you can do it through the private email or a way to relay that information. Maybe Traute, what was the, is there a way to do either a direct, whether it's an email back or how maybe she can
I'll have
relay
Nazi,
her information?
I'll have her just message me right now in the chat, and then I'll send
privately.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Because then that way we can also we can talk about specifics off this public venue. So
okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and share my phone number email. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And then we'll go to Natalie, because I know she was next.
Okay. Hi, Natalie.
Hi. So I just have two clarifying questions really quick. The first of which you might have answered already when you were talking about incarcerated loved ones. So this does not sound like if a respondent is in the criminal court. I know this, you mentioned earlier, this is a civil court process.
Correct.
If the loved one is in the criminal court, there's no crossover. Is that right?
Correct. So this is not a diversion program that's referred by criminal court.
Okay.
However, there are other diversion programs through the criminal courts and through our other court liaison linkages programs that may be something that would be helpful if that's if that's where their current contact is within the system.
Got it. And then my second and last question is also a clarifying question. Earlier, you said that this process is totally voluntary, that at any point the respondent can, let the judge or whoever know they don't want to participate in this. That can happen at any, so let's say they meet all this criteria that's here on the page right now. They're over 18, they have the diagnosis, they've been assessed, and they're unlikely to survive safely, blah, blah, all of it. And they don't want to do it. It ends right there.
Well, I think that's where, if they don't want to, there's I see somebody's gestures. I know, Susan. So I was like, I see that. I shouldn't be looking at that. I should be answering directly Natalie's. And instead I see motion and I track to it. Is that, a lot of individuals in a lot of our programs don't want it maybe the first time they hear about it, but that's the idea of outreach and engagement. That's the idea that, hey, you know what? How about I'll come back tomorrow. Our team will come back tomorrow, or we'll come back on this day, or, okay, fine. You want to meet us at this location? Cool. Then let's just sit there and we'll talk, And so the idea of like this relentless engagement where we really do want to try to engage people in treatment. And that's what our reentry teams and our home team and a lot of our field-based teams, that's their thing. That's what they do. And so we want to emulate that and use that here. And that's why we feel the peers are really a great member to that team, because maybe they'll connect with the peer in a way that they're not connecting with one of our clinicians. So while the individual still can make their decisions and express their choice in the matter, there's a lot of people and a lot of reasons that individuals have concern for them. And so we are going to try to engage them and see if they'll hear us out and if we can try to get them to agree to participate in one way, shape, or form.
Thank you.
But they will have a lawyer as well who will also, if they truly don't want to participate, then they can also tell the lawyer that. That's the representation part.
And Susan is next.
Hello, Susan. Oh, you're muted. Oh, she's muted. Oh, there
Okay,
we
I
go.
figured it out.
There you are.
Okay, hi. So I'm Susan Partovi. I'm the medical director for Homeless Healthcare Los Angeles and expert in street medicine. So I was the one that asked about the starting them on medications already. So I have a couple of questions. One is this going to be under the umbrella of the home team, or is there a completely separate team that's going to be in charge of the outreach engagement and peer, peering, so to speak? So that would be my first question.
Separate. Home team is
Okay.
entirely separate. However,
Okay.
they do share and are under my umbrella of programs. So
Got it.
yes, but they are separate and they
Separate.
are self-contained. The care teams are self-contained. They are, they will do the outreach and engagement as well as the court appearance, as well as the work in the field.
And is there a clinician as part of that team who's agreeing with the diagnosis, or is that a separate step?
That would be part of that. If the initial petitioner wasn't DMH, then at that point, at that initial hearing, when DMH takes over, they're going to review that material and start to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the other point I wanted to make, and so I might need some clarification from you. So when this was coming out, like I specifically spoke with Dr. Galley and Stephanie and Corinne and all them, and they said that meth-induced psychosis was under the umbrella of the psychotic spectrum disorders. And so I just want to make sure, just because lately they've decided, or the American Psychiatric Association has decided, that if someone is clean for 6 months and is still having psychotic symptoms, they're going to now start calling it schizophrenia, even though it was originally, even though they're like 40 or 50 years old. So I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, because some in the street, what's happening now is so difficult to differentiate between an organic schizophrenia versus a meth-induced psychotic individual. And I just want to make sure that we're not fighting amongst people. Whoops, someone's telling me to move. So that we're on that same page. I just wanted to make sure you agree with that. And I'm still listening.
Okay, I was gonna say, because you froze and you cut out, and you've got to be safe because I see things moving behind you. So,
no, I had to move. No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that okay? So I think one of the big things is that these initial determinations are on the court side, right? That prima facie piece. So I think that's where we've been working in partnership with the courts to talk with them about what this looks like. My impression is that the courts are not looking for, I think for us, the diagnostic differentials. They're looking for the major tenets.
Right.
So I think you're right. We're not looking to get into an argument about where it may have started. The key is where they are today and how are we going to try to help them.
Nice.
Yeah.
I just want to say we're running out of time. So if the remaining
Yep,
questions
I'm
can
done.
be
Thank you.
concise, we have about 4 minutes left. So we're going to try to get to everyone. Thanks.
Okay, then I would say, I think Cynthia came up on screen.
Cynthia Sirota.
Yes, Cynthia.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful. I've heard you before. And my question, I have like 3 of them, but it's, first of all, marijuana is inducing schizophrenia. And it's 14 to 15% more on males and 4% on women. And we really have to understand what's going on with the marijuana. Second of all, there's also 2 juvenile residential facilities that are not going to be using them. Is there any way Care Court could go into that residential treatment centers and try to see if Care Court could be established and retrofitted?
Oh, as a housing option or a treatment option?
Yes, as a housing option.
Well, let's do this on the residential ones. Do me a favor. Can you shoot that by private message to Jean? And then
It was on the news the other night.
okay.
And I thought immediately it would be great for Care Court.
Well, and you know what? And maybe that was part of the intention of Supervisor Solis's addition to the board motion yesterday to explore some of the other types of facilities and resources for housing.
Great.
So maybe that was a
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that because I saw it on the news.
Yes.
Okay.
And
And
then
then
out of the 321 million, are you trying to build any new psych hospitals?
No, not psych hospitals are not part of this. This is housing. So, but let me go back to the other point about the marijuana. I'm going to say very similarly to what Dr. Partovi raised, is that I think what we're really focusing on and looking at is the presentation and the behaviors and the impacts to the individual's functioning. So yes, while there is research and things related to the marijuana and how that may be impacting or impairing individuals that are then diagnosed with schizophrenia, you know, we're really trying to focus on and wanting to make sure that we're helping with those things.
And the filing fee you had mentioned was really outrageous. You did not mention anything about the filing fee today.
So
They're getting rid of it.
Okay,
They're getting rid of it.
They got rid of it. So whoever chimed in, so LA County is not going to have a filing fee.
Wonderful, thank you.
And the statute, they are looking to potentially modify it so that there will be no filing fee across the entire state.
And are you going to have another meeting before December 1st for all of us?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, Jennifer. Really wonderful. I appreciate it. All your input
Thank
and
you,
your
Cynthia.
support always. Thank you.
Of course. And thank you for catching me on inconsistencies when I go rogue and off script for different presentations. So thank you for continuity, as you would be the continuity expert. So thank you for being continuity.
Thank you. Take
But
care.
I know Pamela and Tracy are on camera, and Traute says we have 1 or 2 minutes left. So.
I think Pamela's next, right?
Okay, Pamela.
Hi. Okay.
Hi.
All right. So I have a question. Okay, let me see if I can find it.
I think Pamela's going to test me on continuity too.
Okay, I was trying to find out if somebody says if they have very extreme symptoms, they haven't been diagnosed, but they're not necessarily schizophrenia. They might have bipolar or something else, and then but they want to, and they're asking for ending up in a permanent, some kind of less restrictive housing where it's residential in the community. Can that be something that can be considered down the line once they go through crisis treatment? If they're going through some kind of crisis treatment and eventually ending up, can they eventually end up in some kind of, can that be part of their treatment plan where they end up in some kind of, you know, later on, less restrictive, independent living?
Well, the mood disorders are specifically not part of the care criteria. So bipolar disorder, any of that. So that would be my concern, is that you're describing someone who may not be meeting the criteria for the diagnostic.
Okay, what if they actually have, if they're diagnosed then schizophrenic, and then they have symptoms and they're fairly extreme, but then they go through some kind of treatment and eventually their symptoms go down, and then they get to a point, can that be part of their plan, that they eventually end up where they're able to request, okay, I want to get some kind of housing work and end up independent, and I'm stable, and I've been stable for maybe a year or even 6 months. I mean, maybe a year would be great, but that where they would be stable for a longer period of time than just like a couple of months, and then that they could end up in some kind of housing.
The care plan is not fixed. It can change based upon the needs of the individual. But if you're talking more than 1 or 2 years, care court is only intended to be at most a 2-year singular process. So if you do have specifics, and it sounds like you may have somebody intentionally in mind, I'm happy to talk with you offline about it if you want to shoot contact info to Jean, because off the bat, bipolar disorder isn't going to be a criteria unfortunately, for care.
Okay, because I'm thinking, I mean, I got people on both ends, where you got schizophrenic, you got bipolar, you got schizophrenic, you got everything.
I know. So that's why. So, but I'm happy to talk with you one-on-one if you have concerns about somebody specifically. I just don't want to do that in a public forum. So.
Okay. So where do I go then?
Just do me a favor. Give your direct message Jean through the chat, if you can. And I think Tracy. I know, Traute, I'm over.
Can I give her my email? Is that how it works?
Yeah,
you can do that too.
I just messaged
privately.
the chat.
Thank you. I just don't want to see your personal information going up to everybody who's on this.
Okay, so how do I do that?
Tracy?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi. We currently have our son in a hospital right now. He's 20 and he's diagnosed with schizoaffective or schizophrenia. They're not quite sure yet. And he is in denial of his diagnosis. So my question is regarding what is the home team? Is that something that happens after you file for care court?
So actually the home team is one of our teams that is available now, and they focus on homeless outreach and mobile engagement. So individuals that are chronically unhoused, that are having difficulties with performing their activities of daily living, what we were referring to as that gravely disabled adjacent.
Right.
And we have psychiatrists, nurses, social workers, psychologists that can go into the field and outreach and engage individuals.
When we had him picked up on a 5150, we had the PET team out. I call it the PET team, but is that the home team, the psychiatric evaluation team?
No, those are actually our mobile clinician teams that are dispatched countywide and have the ability to evaluate for hospitalization. And they are the ones responding from the 1-800 number or from the daytime emergency response teams.
So if I go to the DMH website, I might find how to reach out to get to a home team, because you guys start with this care court December 1st of this year, right? 2020. Right. So, and then how do we get our case? Oh, go ahead.
So do me a favor, since home team's under. So I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. That can you just send your contact info to Jean on a private message, and then we can talk offline tomorrow and figure,
Sure, I'll do
go
that.
over specifics instead of, I really don't want to have
I understand
information in this space. So
okay, appreciate it.
Of course. And I know there's I want to make sure, I know there's a lot of questions in the chat, and I know we had our survey that we had up on our final page. And that also has our contact information for that 1-800 number as well.
Hey, doctor, so what was the final survey percentages? Do you guys have that out of the 75 or 80 people? or is there still taking it?
For that first poll,
Yeah.
I'm gonna defer to, there we go, Chris and Jean. I was gonna say they're
Okay, thank
yeah.
you. Great presentation. Let's do some working groups during the summer. I know South Bay Attorney Casey and Dr. Stansbury, myself and others. I know Trouty's going to be on it. We'd like to maybe meet with all the salts too. Maybe we could bring it, do a road show and do a speakers bureau that we can be. This was excellent, Dr. Hunt. So let's
I'm
continue
glad.
this so we can this summer really roll out and share.
Who's speaking right now? Because Ed's got his hand up and came on camera.
Oh, it's Rick Polito speaking for Mr. Ed Casey, our board member.
Okay.
Rick Polito from NAMI.
Let's let Ed ask his
Awesome.
question.
Yes, I was gonna say, hi.
Hi, Dr. Hunt. My name is Ed Casey, and now I'll ask my questions quickly since we're out of time. My questions concern the medications, the medication aspect of the plan. So here are my questions. Who in the process is going to determine what's the prescription for the medication for the respondent? Who in the process will be responsible for implementing the aspect of the plan that the response plan that will ensure that the medications are taken? And then lastly, who's going to pay for the medications?
Okay. So first piece was about the assessment and determinations, right? So we will have psychiatrists and supervising psychiatrists on the care team. So that is our first component related to that. Second is that while medications may be recommended, there is no forcible medication component to this plan. And I know that that's to a lot, that has a lot of reactions from a lot of people. So it was clear that insurance is not to be a barrier to care. So even for individuals that may have private insurance, the plan is that we will provide the services and then we will deal on the back end with the reimbursement and the agreements with the private insurance parties.
So does that mean you would be the last resort, so to speak, for paying for medications?
There are different ways that we are able to bill for services, but we are not, that the focus is not the billing up front. The focus is we want to make sure that if an individual is eligible for care, that we are providing them a comprehensive plan to help them and support them. And there are different funding measures in place to be able to either tap into or seek reimbursement if they have managed care.
And I asked the question because my son has schizophrenia, and it made a world of difference when he went from daily pills to the monthly injection.
Yes.
And the difference in cost,
yeah,
we all know is tremendous, but it makes a world of difference when it comes to compliance rates.
We have, and the county and our teams, we do have long-acting injectables available.
Oh.
And those are administered by members of our teams in other programs. So the shot versus pill is not going to be, I believe, an issue. But again, it goes back to whether or not the person agrees to voluntarily take medication and participate in that.
Okay. Well, that's good news. Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you for asking. And Maria came on screen too.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Dr. Hunt. So my question is, I'm also interested in the home team because I have a son that's been homeless and he's declining for well over a year. Okay. So I'm interested in the home team as well.
Could you do me a favor? And as I suggested to other members on the call, can you directly message Jean with that information?
So would you tell me, how would I do that?
Maria, I just dropped, I chatted you directly. So just if you want to respond in the chat.
Okay.
Do you see how it has Jean as the two?
So what I just need to put in there, just my what do I need
However
to?
you
Whatever
like.
contact you'd like. Yeah. However we
Okay.
can reach you, and we'll get you in touch. Dr.
Yeah.
Hunt will get you the home team contact.
Okay.
And this was one of our goals of the conversation too, is that, you know, again, this is about care. Yes, that's our primary conversation point. But as Dr. Wong said at the board meeting yesterday, you know, we hope that the community doesn't wait. And now that you're hearing about these other things and other resources and programs, they're available now. So, and I was in another public forum and had a community member reach out, and I spoke with her, and we were able to figure out a program that we were going to see if we could have somebody from that program outreach their loved one. So, you know, that is the whole goal of conversations like this. So.
Any other questions, Jean, from the chat? And appreciate you guys staying on and answering all the questions.
Oh, no, of
And
course.
there's also a survey link, or the one, we put it in the chat and the one here. And I know DMH is very interested in getting your input. So please, if you can, fill out the survey.
And thank you. We really appreciate the conversation, the collaboration, and the opportunity to be able to have this space to meet like this.
Where is the survey?
It is, if
You can either scan via your phone this presentation here, or it's right here on the screen, and it's also in the chat. But we'll also send out, you know, via people who registered into our full database, we're going to send out the survey.
Oh, wonderful. Because I realized I didn't keep it on the screen a good amount of time because we went back to the workflow. So that would be great, Traute. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, here we got two more. If you guys are willing to stay on, we appreciate it.
Of course. You're okay with the Zoom staying on, right, Traute?
I think we have it till 8. So
okay.
I think Christina was next.
Sure.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just wanted to request, Jennifer, if you can please also reach out to me. I kind of have an immediate situation with my son. And I did leave my contact number with Jean.
Yes, and I think I got it.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted, because I didn't actually talk to you, but I wanted to request if you can please call me when you have a chance.
Okay. Do you need possibly assistance tonight, Christina?
Well, my son is currently inpatient, and I also was evicted from board and care. You know, it is pretty serious. He's gravely disabled. He has nowhere to go.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, it is pretty. I mean, if you can call me tonight, that's great.
Okay. Just please make sure that Christina, that the phone number that you give it to Jean, okay?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think Cynthia, you have another question?
I do. I'm sorry.
Why are you sorry? Questions are good.
Thank you so much. Okay, I want to know what kind of training that you're requiring for the peers to help out the individuals, because I think that they really have to be really well trained and know how to talk and reflect back and listen and have empathy and compassion.
And we haven't even gotten that far, because I have not yet even gotten a budget authorized and finalized to ask for people to apply to the positions. So yes, I'm being honest.
Okay.
So I can't.
Lived experience. NAMI does phenomenal work.
I know.
And we have so many wonderful peer groups.
And I know you do. And in my other prior assignment in life in the county, I worked with and had NAMI members that would come and speak and teach in my class as I taught CIT. So NAMI is a phenomenal partner. So when we can figure out how we're going to hire, then we will figure out how we make sure we get everyone trained.
Well, I want to say share, and even Painted Brain is doing peer groups.
There's lots of great resources in
There
our
is, for people to get out there.
And we're also training people through the HCAI peer support specialist training.
Right.
So yeah, reach out to us. And
there are
lots of peer support specialists we're training through the NAMI affiliates here.
Yes. So that's why I'm first goal, money and positions. Second goal, then we work on how are we going to make sure that we have the best trained team possible.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was my
Of
question.
course. Of course. Thank you. And I believe I have, and I don't want to misquote, but I have different meetings set up over the course of the next few weeks. And I want to say that, and I believe I have the name, but I don't want to associate the wrong name to the wrong programs. But I believe I am in contact with people from Painted Brain and some of the programs. So.
I think that's it for the questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Hunt. And
of course,
Jean,
thank
we really
you.
appreciate
Thank you
it.
all.
Lots of positive comments in the chat. And I tried to monitor the chat as well for those who requested the slides and the recording. And if I didn't get it and you didn't receive it, feel free again to email info@namiglac.org and we'll make sure to get you either the presentation or the recording, and we'll send it out to the folks who registered also via Eventbrite. So thank you so much. We really appreciate this town hall.
Oh, well, thank you. And I couldn't have done it without my colleagues and partners.
Thank you.
So to the offer from not all of our NAMI partners, Chris for making sure that we had our tech going through successfully. We didn't get frozen, we didn't glitch, we're good. And to my colleague and partner, Jean Ho, for all of her amazing work and collaboration. And so thank you everybody for the opportunity. And if you would like us to continue those conversations in whatever format and capacity, happy to do so. So
thank you. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
Much. Thank you.
No, thank you all. So, there's a hand up, Steve. Does Steve give one final say?
It wasn't a hand, it was a bouquet of excitement fireworks or something.
Oh, it looks like a hand. So like a high five or a raised hand.
We want to call on everybody. I mean, you're so engaging. I thought I don't have any problems, so maybe I just want you to call anyway. But anyway, thank you very much. You were terrific. There are some questions I had to ask, but I'm going to leave it on a happy note.
Okay, but you can also send me your contact or send the contact information to Jean and you and I can correspond.
Yeah, I put it in the chat. I mean, Ronnie's going to be at the Orange County, the California Behavioral Planning Council, and Stephanie and Tyler and all those guys. Everybody's going to be talking about this and the revised gravely disabled and Eggman's bill and
43.
A lot going on. Not a dull day in the life of county health.
No, definitely not. But we're here to help people, so we want to do that as best we can.
You were terrific, so thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks again, everyone, for your participation.